Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you can find a way to lose. You can find yourself being disappointed. And probably the biggest fight at 154, never going to happen because Errol Spence is still a little butthurt because Keith Thurman didn't want to fight him when Errol Spence wanted to fight Keith Thurman at 147 pounds. But in case you didn't know, it's official. Spence and Thurman are back at 154 pounds. And I think we're going to get a shakeup, man. I ain't going to lie. If both win, Spence and Thurman, that showdown is inevitable. Now, Spence is supposed to be fighting Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu is not an easy fight. Keith Thurman's fighting Fundor. That sure as hell is not an easy fight. But I'm just going to say this. If they both win, I think we just got to really understand the history when it comes to these two guys. Both of those guys were doing the business at 147, man. You know, and they were dominant. Keith was dominant. Spence was dominant. But in injuries, timing, marriages, promotional politics, it just kept them apart and ended up getting guys away from the sport. You know what I'm saying? But this fight is one of the most anticipated matchups in years at 154 pounds, since that's where they settle now. And I'm just being honest with you. You can kind of think of it like a reunion episode of your favorite boxing soap opera, because when it comes to these two guys, there's always some kind of drama. And the soap opera hits hard, you know what I'm saying? Now, Spence and Tszyu. Some people are sitting here discussing how tough Errol Spence's return fight is going to be. I'm going to tell you this. Very tough. I don't understand why people downplay Tim Tszyu. I understand what happened in the first fight with Fundor. Tim Tszyu was doing very well. He should have tapped out early when he got that cut, but he didn't. That blood was just cascading into his eyes. They should have stopped. He should have just said, he should have did the right thing. His corner should have did the right thing, but they didn't. Anyway, he lost his belt. Then the rematch, we saw what happened. Then with Mertz's Aliyev, we saw what happened. But Tim Tszyu has made some changes as a new trainer. But I just think people need to stop that. Because when you talk about Tim Tszyu and his credentials, shit. Tim Tszyu, he was undefeated for quite some time. He does have 3 losses. But he's a dangerous puncher. And working with Pedro Diaz, he's working on his patience, combinations. He's a problem, I'm telling you. He's going to bring some pressure, discipline, doing a much better job cutting the ring off, and trying to set up his shots. Now, with Errol Spence, this is going to be his first fight at 154 and first fight in 3 years. Be a bit of a weight adjustment. There's some questions about his stamina. It's always been great, but you have to be out the ring for a while and fighting in a new weight class. You just don't know how Errol Spence is going to perform. Coming off the Crawford loss, mental and physical rebound is required. Is he where he needs to be mentally and physically? But I'll tell you this. He got to avoid early mistakes against a smart counterpuncher like Tszyu. Because if Errol Spence is just coming in there with his old pressure style, mash up, crash up, break you down, it's not going to work. Now, for a fan perspectives, right? Some believe Spence could underestimate Tszyu because he's not Crawford, and figure Crawford was probably, arguably the best pound for pound fighter in the sport, and Tim Tszyu doesn't bring a tenth of what Crawford possessed. But I'll say this. If that's the mentality of fans in Errol Spence, they could be in for a rude awakening. But others say this fight will prove that Spence still has the elite heart. I'm going to tell you, I don't think anybody should question Errol Spence's heart. I think Errol Spence has the heart of a lion. It's just can he perform, mentally, physically, But that's where in training camp they should be working through that, making him as uncomfortable as they possibly can to make sure he's still that guy. Now, Spence has got to mix the pressure with precision. We know what Errol Spence has brought in the past, but he's got to be more precise. He's got to work on his defense more. And I think he's got to really work on his footwork, be a little bit faster on his feet. Because Tim Tszyu, I saw him in his most recent fight. Tim Tszyu, he looked good. Does he beat Errol Spence? I don't know. But does Errol Spence beat him? I don't know. There's a bigger question mark over Errol Spence than Tim Tszyu right now. Put it to you that way. But I just want to see what happens if Spence is being really aggressive and Tim Tszyu starts shooting counters. But if Spence starts looking like a GPS trying to find his corner, fans are going to freak out. Because that means Tim Tszyu put the Aussie bing-bings on him. But Tim Tszyu could be looking like a GPS finding his way to the canvas if Errol Spence does what we know he can. Now with Keith Thurman and Sebastian Fundora, that's what you call a long-range nightmare right there. You know what I'm saying? Fundora, 6'6", 6'7", 80-something inch reach, left jab, that shit like a spear, African spear. You know what I'm saying? He moves awkwardly, unorthodox, southpaw stance. He's trying to fight tall now, trying to fight rangy. He's a nightmare matchup for anybody, especially traditional boxers. Thurman's going to have some challenges, man. He's been inactive. He's trying to get back into the swing of things, man. But ring rust could be a factor. But Keith Thurman has a different commitment level. Talks a lot about his, his trainer who's passed away, Ben Getty, and he instilled something in Keith Thurman. That fire is still lit. Keith Thurman has something different about him. All those years of training with that coach, he turned Keith Thurman into a champion. And Keith Thurman still has that quality, man. So I think Keith Thurman should look pretty good with that lateral movement. I think he's going to explode and land some shit on Fundora. That's just me. But he's got to find a way to get inside of that Fundora jab. If Fundora sits back and fights tall, he's going to have some success, man. But Thurman's going to need some patience, I think. Can't be foolishly chasing Fundora around the ring, especially if Fundora's taking a little half a step back, keeping that jab out there, shooting the left. Fundora could be on the end of those shots. Keith Thurman could be on the end of those shots, so that could be all bad. But fan perspective, some feel Fundora's style could expose Thurman's timing, could disrupt Thurman, and could just keep Thurman at bay and make it impossible for Thurman to get it and land any punches of any meaning. Now, others believe Thurman's power and experience is going to shine. I think it's going to be a combination of both until the right adjustments are made by both fighters, and someone's going to start to elevate and take over. And it could be Fundora just starting to snatch the flesh off of Thurman's face with his jab and left hand, or Thurman could come out there, man, that lateral movement and explosiveness and land that mega boom Thurman one-time left hook, uppercut, right hand, whatever it is, and put Fundora down for the count. But I just think what that's going to end up being with Thurman's patience, Fundora's awkward angles, I think that shit's going to end up being like chess match of the week. You know what I'm saying? Thurman better not bring a ruler to this fight, because he'll need a ladder for Fundora's reach. You know what I'm saying? Because Fundora, that dude, 80-plus inch reach at 154 is crazy. Now, they both may not get through these fights. But I'll tell you what, I'm trying to see who has it harder. Spence versus Tszyu. Shorter, pressure-based fight, technical counterpuncher with angles. Fans expect a classic pressure versus counter fight. Errol Spence, I hope he's using more angles. I don't know what Errol Spence is going to do in this fight. But it's going to be a pressure-based fight, I believe. Thurman and Fundora, you got an extreme height. You got a reach disadvantage. Somebody's going to have to navigate awkward angles. Got to maintain that stamina. Fans expect a long-range jabbing battle with patience and timing. So if I was to try to give a little hot take, I'd say Spence may have a slightly easier physical matchup. But Tszyu is, maybe Tszyu is becoming sharper tactically under Pedro Diaz. But Thurman may look awkward, but Fundora can end things with one clean shot if Thurman overcommits because of that reach. And Fundora's got power, so don't sleep on Fundora. These are times where I wish HBO was still in boxing. I used to enjoy when they did the tail of the tape. Like they talk about style, strengths, weaknesses, southpaw orthodox mentality, fan perception, you know what I'm saying? If you think about Errol Spence, he's aggressive. He has pressure, volume puncher, body work. Was a body work king at 147. Can he still be that? Keith Thurman's more smooth angles, timing, speed, counter puncher, huge power. The strengths for Spence, stamina, body punishment, relentless aggression. Keith Thurman's power, accuracy, ring IQ combinations. But we'll talk about the weaknesses of these fighters. Spence can get countered if he overcommits. sometimes he can be predictable because before, we don't know how he's going to look now. We knew he'd come working behind that jab, pin you with that left hand, and just go to work with the free hand on the ropes. With Keith Thurman, he can get overwhelmed by pressure, stamina in high-volume fights, and Keith Thurman sometimes can just kind of get a bit reckless in fights, you know what I'm saying? But what's interesting about the fight is Spence is southpaw, Keith is orthodox. But I think the mentality is going to have a lot to do with it. You know, stamina, conditioning, but the mentality. If Errol Spence is still relentless, still has the mentality of being a comeback king, is mentally tough, can work through stuff in training camp, it's going to be interesting. But one thing about Keith Thurman, he's calculated, strategic. Sometimes he's patient to a fault. He can't let somebody outwork him. So when I look at it and try to do it from just like as a fan and the perception of a fan, I think Spence is a fearless bulldozer. He could be cautious in his return, but I think he's a fearless bulldozer. And Keith Thurman's a smooth operator with a punch. We just have to sit back and see. But some would say Spence is the bulldog at the front of the ring and Thurman is the cat on the mantelpiece. One jumps, the other claws back. You know what I'm saying? And that's a pretty good description of both of these guys. So, is Spence afraid of Thurman? Is that why he doesn't want to fight him? You just got to go back and look at 147. I don't think Spence has ever been afraid of Thurman. But the fact that he just doesn't want to fight him, I mean, even now he said he won't fight him at 154. I just think that's the biggest fight. Actually, maybe one of the biggest fights in boxing, Thurman and Spence. But Spence doesn't want nothing to do with it. You know what I'm saying? So I got to come in hocus pocus, do my wicked sorcery and shit, cast a spell, and hope we can get Spence versus Thurman in 2026. I know Thurman never gave Spence that fight. Spence said this shit publicly. Fans interpret this as Spence avoiding Thurman now. Others say he respected Thurman's skills, but I don't think he's afraid of anyone. I don't think either one of them are afraid. But when I hear Spence's statement, I won't fight Keith every fight because he didn't want to fight me. Every single fight. I just don't understand why he won't fight him. He won't fight Keith ever. Every fight that I have, it won't be with Keith Thurman. That shit is crazy to me. But I understand because I kind of respect that because he's still bitter and sour. I get it, but I can understand people who see it as an excuse. But I mean, I'm going to ask y'all, how does this play into fan narratives and trash talk? Because I tell you what, Spence may not chase Thurman, but if he meets him at 154, you can expect fireworks now. Hypothetical, Spence and Thurman at 154, who wins? I just got to look at the styles, man. Spence's pressure, Thurman's timing, that's a classic clash. That's why they need to make this fight. Body work versus counter combinations, like who blinks first? All these prediction talking points I'm hearing people talk about. Look, if Spence cuts the ring and controls the pace, I mean, he's going to get touched, but if he can avoid getting hurt, he likely wins the fight. But if Thurman stays patient, sticks to counters, keeps distance, he can steal rounds. So, you know, it's the bulldog versus the cat on stilts. May the best furry fighter win. You know what I'm saying? Both of these guys have egos. Trash talk will be inevitable. I don't know if Spence will say too much, but you know Thurman gonna talk shit. But Spence may, because the fact that he feels like Thurman put duck sauce on the fried rice. But fans love narratives, man. Spence has a comeback story. Thurman proving he's still elite. And there are going to be some legacy implications here, man. You know, the winner versus the loser. If Spence wins, no one avoids me now. Narrative, redemption after the Crawford loss. If Thurman wins, I'm back narrative. Erasing ring rust concerns. If both lose elsewhere, the fight never happens. The hype dies. It is what it is. And they both could lose. Timzo and Fundora, no joke. But I wonder how this fight could define the 154-pound division. If Thurman and Spence both win their next fights and end up fighting each other. I'll tell you what, this fight may decide the next wave of memes for boxing Twitter too, because if somebody get knocked out or get hurt or be dancing salsa in that ring on the way back to their corner, like I said, using that you had to find that GPS to get back to your corner. You know, the memes are gonna go crazy. So, I don't know, man. I may go and post some polls on YouTube, man, and ask people who's gonna take it. You know, Errol Spence the Bulldog or Keith Thurman the Cat, man. Ask people who they put their money on, Spence or Thurman. Like really, who would you put your money on? At 154, Spence or Thurman. People talking about Thurman still looking rusty. I'll tell you what, he ain't gonna look rusty for this next fight. But I'll tell you this, Spence is still licking his wounds from that Crawford fight. It's a mental game too, people. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how it all plays out. I'm looking forward to it, man. Both men return to 154, each with tough upcoming fights. Both win. Fight could break the division wide open. Wide open. Spence's pressure, Thurman's timing. This shit is must watch TV if they can make the fight. Anyway, get your popcorn ready because the 154-pound division just got real. This fight, no kidding, could redefine who's the king of junior middleweight. Like it really, really could, man. Anyway, Errol Spence, don't be so bitter, man. If you win and Thurman wins, y'all make that fight. You know it's going to be huge money on the table. Huge money on the table. Because when you think about Errol Spence, you think about Keith Thurman. There's nobody out there who's got the profiles of these guys. You know what I'm saying? This is two former unified welterweight champions, undefeated for years at their peak, personalities who traded words, styles that naturally clashed. At 154, this really becomes a legacy fight, a redemption fight, a high-stakes comeback fight, and possibly the biggest name versus name fight in the division. There's got big names at 154, but ain't nobody named as big as Errol Spence and Keith Thurman. We know what happened to Spence. He's been through a lot. Layoff, he's moved up in weight, the injury, the loss to Crawford. People still wonder if Spence is elite. Can he take a punch? But the damage catch up to him? I tell you what, if Spence wins this fight at 154, he proves he still belongs. He's going to instantly rebuild credibility. And he's already a top name, but he goes right to the top of the mountain, man. And a win over Thurman would rewrite the Crawford loss narrative, which is what I think Errol Spence would like. It will restore his reputation, give him a new career arc, and make him a real player at 154. And with Keith Thurman, look, he's been inactive, but he had a fight not too long ago. He's had some injuries. He's family. He got a son and 2 daughters now, so he's had some gaps in between fights. But some people say, Keith Thurman against Brock Jarvis, the first round looked a little bit rough, but Thurman showed he had his legs. He still had some timing once he warmed up. The punch resistance, he was getting hit with some hard shots, but he had some punch resistance, and he was motivated, and he had the power. At 154, Keith Thurman looked less drained. He looked healthier. But that's what happens when you're not weight cut dependent. You know what I'm saying? And he knocked that young boy out. That knockout was vicious. That shit was actually scary. But if he wins this fight against Fundora, he immediately becomes relevant again. He jumps back into big fights. He gets the payday he's been missing. He reclaims elite status. And that's why he should fight Spence, because if he beats Spence, that'll be the biggest win of Thurman's career. It erased all the inactivity, criticism, and him putting duck sauce on the fried rice. Put him back at the mountaintop, too, and make him a real threat at 154. But again, when you start looking at these guys stylistically, can Errol Spence walk down Keith Thurman? Does he still have the volume? He still have the pressure? Can he still go to the body? Thurman, the movement, timing, lateral angle, sharp power shots. I think Spence and Thurman both are going to be stronger at 154. I think Thurman, this next fight against Fundora, I think he's going to be faster than what he was against Brock Jarvis. But if he and Spence fought, I think Spence would try to drown him. And Thurman would try to outbox and pop shot him and counter him and hit him with something to buzz him and then try to finish him off. But just looking at it, it's like, can Thurman keep Spence off of him? Like, if we get a prime Spence and a prime Thurman, Can Thurman keep Spence off of him? Can Spence trap him? Whose stamina is going to hold up? Who has more left? So this becomes youth versus wear and tear, pressure versus movement, redemption versus survival if these guys were to fight. And I said it before, I'm going to say it again. This shit's probably the biggest fight at 154. Because at 154, they got great fighters, but who's a massive crossover star at 154? Xander Zayas is kind of getting going. Abbas Baru just lost. Virgil Ortiz is big. He's a big deal. Jerome Butsinis is a big deal. Josh Kelly's a big deal. Murtazali was a big deal. Jamel Charlo's a big deal, but he's not there. But Jamel Charlo is a massive crossover star, but he's not really active. But a massive crossover star, I mean, if Errol Spence and Keith Thurman, they're it. They're already established. Mainstream recognition, old school fan interest, casual fan interest, built-in storyline, unfinished business, man. Why? I mean, what are we doing here? Somebody tell me something. If both win, the fight could headline a pay-per-view, draw the biggest gate at 154, dominate boxing media, become a Saudi-backed event, overshadow belt fights. Belts wouldn't even be necessary for these two, man. The story sells it by itself. But there's some legacy implications here, boy, because Spence has got to prove he's not washed, prove the Crawford loss didn't define him, become dangerous at 154. Then this whole thing about titles, I don't know what's going to happen with these titles because everybody turning their back on sanctioned bodies, but Errol Spence can get that pound-for-pound respect back. And if Thurman wins, hey, that shit could be like comeback of the one of the biggest comeback stories in boxing. Jumps back to elite status, secures major future fights, man. Validates him moving up and silence critics, you know what I'm saying? Either way, someone's career is revived, someone's hopes are going to be crushed. That's why it's big, you know what I'm saying? It's a dangerous fight for both. Spence can't come and lose to Crawford, inactivity, and lose again. He just can't do that. His aura will be out of his future mega fights to be out of here. But we could understand Errol Spence's situation. But for Thurman, it just proved that he's a pop. He's dad. He's a husband. He's done with boxing. You know what I mean? You can't be half-hearted in this game, but Thurman knows that. He just become a gatekeeper and lose big money opportunities, man. That's why this fight won't happen unless both look good first and get wins, and we'll see what happens with PBC and tune-ups and what they want to do and look at the timing. So Thurman versus Spence at 154, I'm telling you, man, that shit's probably the biggest fight in the division. They just have to win. Got the history, name value, style clash, the type of money going to be on the table, redemption stakes, unfinished business. Belts don't even matter. It's just about pride, survival, and legacy, man. Anyway, make the damn fight and stop playing around. Y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.